Hi friends, it's Miss Drywa. So for science today, we're still continuing our conversation about basically how the Earth's surface changes slowly over time. Now, on Tuesday we talked about weathering and how that's the breakdown of rocks and how rocks break apart. Yesterday we talked about erosion, and that's the moving of sediments or pieces of rock. And now today we're going to talk about deposition, and that's the dropping of the sediments in the rocks. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. So I told you they all kind of come together as one. So the weathering, you have the water, the ice, the plant roots. They all are able to break that rock apart, right? Or bake it into smaller pieces. And then those tiny little pieces that fall off, they are called sediments. And those sediments, which is the rock, the soil, the dirt, or the sand, they then move through erosion. Erosion moves those pieces somewhere else. And as they're moving through, they eventually have to drop and land somewhere. And that's where we get to today, deposition. So I'm going to read a little bit, talk about some images, and then you'll have a Nearpod. All right, so let's get started. So deposition. Deposition is the dropping of sediment by wind, water, ice, or gravity. So remember, we're dropping now. So either the water, ice, wind, or gravity is dropping the pieces of rock or soil, or called sediment. After pieces of the earth are moved through erosion, they are deposited somewhere else through deposition. So remember, erosion is moving those items. Then they're deposited or dropped somewhere else. It could be only a few feet away or many miles away. Deposition happens when water slows down or stops moving, the wind dies down or stops blowing, or when the glaciers melt. New landforms can also be created from the deposited material. For example, waves can deposit sediment in areas offshore where they can build up to be sand dunes. Now we're going to talk about different pictures and talk about everything that was basically just read. So let me get that for you. Okay, so I'm just going to start with this picture here, friends. So I want you to think about right now, if erosion happens, let's say through wind, right? And, I don't know if you've ever been at the beach when it's very windy, and it can be kind of dangerous because the sand, all the loose sand that the wind picks up is going to go flying. But when that wind is done blowing, and eventually it will be, all the sand that's in the air from the wind has to drop somewhere. And over time, friends, if it keeps dropping in the same area, you're going to get something called a sand dune. And this is a sand dune. It's just a mound of sand. It's a big pile of sand. So, and there could be rocks in there, sand, rocks, soil, whatever basically the wind picks up. Now, also, it's not just the wind. You could have the water. And if the water brings up all the sediment that it took, it could place it somewhere else. So think about it. So we talked about erosion and how the waves would come up and take all the loose rocks and soils and everything and bring it back. Now it's just floating around in the water now. So either it could drop to the ocean floor, or when the next wave comes in, it might push it back up and drop it back on the sand or the dirt, but in a different spot. This is all deposition. It's just the dropping of the rocks or sand in a different location. So again, if you're on the beach and a whole bunch of wind comes this way, and the wind stops and drops all the sand and the dirt and the rocks here, we created a sand dune. Now that's a new landform because it might have been flat before, but over time, over many, many of years, now we have a sand dune. A new landform is creating. Speaking of sand dunes, when you have a desert, All right, and this is a desert, friends. It's very sandy, and when the wind blows, it picks up all that sand, and again, it's going to drop it somewhere else. It has to. Eventually, it has to drop it, whether when the waves are done moving or the wind is done blowing. It has to drop somewhere. In this case here, the wind will stop blowing and it drops it somewhere. And you can see all the different sand dunes. Some are big, some are small, some are shaped differently. It's pretty cool, actually. And how it gives it a kind of a different look. Where this could have been a flat desert many, 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 many years ago, now we have a bunch of different sand dunes everywhere because of deposition. They were dropped. The sand was dropped somewhere new. Going back to what I was talking about in the ocean or the water. Now, this one isn't so much wind, this one is the water. Eventually, the water's going to calm down. You know, if you're at the beach and you see a lot of waves and everything, it's not calm water. Calm water is when there's really not a lot of waves and the water just looks peaceful. It looks calm, right? Now, eventually, the water does calm down. And all the sand and rocks and dirt and soil that it picked up from offshore, from the beach area where all the sand is and all the rocks are, has to go somewhere. Well, that's when gravity comes in and goes whoop down to the ocean floor. So it moved it somewhere else because all this sand, or most of this sand, could have been on the beach, and now it's on the bottom of the ocean floor. And you have little tiny sand dunes in there, you can see. Right? So we have the sand dune here. This sand dune, all this sand dune could have been caused by deposition of wind blowing sand and rocks, or the water taking and leaving sand and rocks. We have these sand dunes. These could be created from wind, right? Just years and years and years of wind blowing sand, and it's going to keep going. This sand on top of here might move to over here, or if the wind's really strong, it might move further. And then also you have the water dropping sand to the ocean floor. That was once on the beach that we were sitting in. All right, friends, so we have deposition. It's the dropping of rocks, sand, dirt, oil, soil somewhere new. We talked about weathering. That was the breaking down or the breaking apart of rocks. We have erosion, which is the movement. It's the moving of the rocks and the dirt and the soil or the sand or the sediments, right? That's what that's called. Sediments are sand, dirt, rock, soil, all that. And then when it's moving, it has to eventually drop, and that's called deposition. All right, friends? Awesome job. You're going to do a Nearpod now on deposition, and then tomorrow we're going to bring it all together. All right, so have a great day. Bye.